Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're setting off on a really fascinating, investigative journey deep into the psychology and neuroscience of our most frustrating habits. We are basically going to figure out exactly why we do the things we don't want to do. You know the feeling, right? You swear to yourself that this time is going to be different. You decide you're absolutely going to stop procrastinating or stop overthinking or, actually stop skipping your workouts. And everything goes perfectly for a few days. But then, suddenly, you're right back where you started. So why do you keep making the same mistakes? Well, I want you to know right off the bat that this isn't a failure of willpower. It's not laziness. Repeating bad habits is actually a hardwired neurological design feature of your brain. Think about this. Your brain hogs a massive 20% of your body's energy. So, to conserve that precious power, it constantly automates as much as possible using cognitive shortcuts. These are called heuristics. Now, this automation process is fantastic for things like tying your shoes or brushing your teeth, but it unfortunately also automates negative patterns. Your brain doesn't stop to ask if a habit is healthy. It literally just asks, have we done this before, and takes the path of least resistance. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our literal map to hacking the brain's wiring today. 1. The mystery of repeated mistakes. 2. Schemas, your mental filters. 3. The science of habit loops. 4. Neuroplasticity, rewiring your brain. And 5. Cognitive coaching for change. So, kicking things off with Section 1, the mystery of repeated mistakes and why we get trapped in a loop. Moving right along to Section 2, schemas, your mental filters. Think of these as the blueprint of reality. So what exactly is a cognitive schema? Essentially, it's a long-lasting pattern of thought or behavior that organizes categories of information. Think of it like a mental framework that was shaped very early in your childhood. Because information overload in the real world is totally exhausting, we have to filter out the noise, right? So we build these schemas so our brain can process our environment incredibly fast, almost entirely at an unconscious level. We basically just fill in the blanks of reality with stuff we already know. But as you can probably guess, not all schemas are helpful. On one hand, we have adaptive schemas, which reflect a healthy, functional reality. But on the other hand, we have early maladaptive schemas, or EMS. These represent a highly distorted reality. They usually originate in childhood in response to chronically unmet emotional needs or maybe dysfunctional environments. And the big problem here is that these distorted blueprints endure well into adulthood, even when they're totally irrelevant, which causes us to act out these outdated defensive behaviors in our modern lives. And this brings us to a huge piece of the puzzle: EMS reenactment and cognitive consistency. You might wonder, why would someone actively seek out toxic relationships or self-sabotage a really great job? Well, it's because we unconsciously reenact familiar traumas. Our brains intensely crave what psychologists call cognitive consistency. Basically, your brain prefers a stable, familiar perspective of the world, even if that perspective is completely distorted or harmful, over the discomfort of a new, healthy reality. We desperately want the world to match our childhood blueprints. Which brings us to Section 3, the science of habit loops, the actual engine driving our actions. Every single habit you have follows a 3-step neurological loop popularized by Charles Duhigg. First, there's the cue, a trigger, like, say, feeling stressed out after work. Second is the routine, the behavior itself, like deciding to skip your planned workout and just collapse on the couch instead. And third, the reward, that temporary relief from anxiety or physical exertion. The brain takes notes here, realizing this loop provided instant relief, and wires it right in for tomorrow. And this brilliantly illustrates what happens under the hood. Research out of MIT actually found that as behaviors become habitual, neural activity shifts from the prefrontal cortex to the basal ganglia. When a habit is brand new, you're using your prefrontal cortex. That's your conscious decision-making center. It takes effort, it takes willpower, but eventually, the basal ganglia, the brain's pattern recognition engine, takes over entirely. It goes completely on autopilot. You don't deliberate, you just act. But there is a massive catch here: the reward problem. See, the basal ganglia will only encode and automate a behavior if there's an immediate, unexpected reward. This is exactly why fitness or diet routines so often fail. The rewards of long-term weight loss or better cardiovascular health, those are delayed by weeks or even months. The dopamine signal is just way too weak for the basal ganglia to care. If the reward isn't immediate, the habit loop simply doesn't close. All right, on to Section 4, neuroplasticity and how to start rewiring your brain. The good news, neuroplasticity is your brain's ability to build entirely new physical pathways. Think of it kind of like walking through a dense, untouched forest. The first time you try to push through the brush, it's exhausting, it's difficult, you're getting scratched up. But if you walk that exact same path every single day, it eventually becomes a clear, easy trail, while the old, negative path overgrows and disappears. Every single time you choose a new response, you are physically rewiring the circuitry of your brain. So, what does this actually look like on a real timeline? You've probably heard the whole "it takes 21 days to build a habit" thing, right? Well, that is a myth. A landmark 2009 study from University College London found that, on average, it takes 66 days for a new behavior to become automatic. That's 66 days of walking that new path in the forest before the basal ganglia completely takes over. You just have to survive that formation window. So, how on earth do we survive those 66 days if the biological rewards are delayed? The answer is gamification. A 2022 meta-analysis published in the Journal of Medical Internet Research found that gamified interventions, things like getting instant points, keeping up streaks, or unlocking badges immediately after a workout, actually satisfy the basal ganglia's demand for an instant reward. This artificial bridge increases adherence by an incredible 27%. It basically tricks the brain into locking in the habit until the real, intrinsic rewards can finally take over. And finally, Section 5, Cognitive Coaching for Change and how we can interrupt that loop. A really major tool used in coaching is identifying your common cognitive distortions. These are the specific ways we negatively limit ourselves and warp reality to fit our old maladaptive schemas. Maybe it's catastrophizing a small mistake at work or assuming you know exactly what someone else is thinking. By catching these distortions in real time, you shine a giant spotlight on the false blueprints your brain is trying to use. You essentially drag the processing back to the conscious prefrontal cortex. To really build that self-awareness, we can lean on Arthur Costa and Robert Garmston's renowned cognitive coaching strategies. First, pausing, taking a moment to simply stop, listen, and let thoughts form rather than just reacting on autopilot. Second, paraphrasing, bridging thoughts by reflecting back what was just heard or experienced, confirming reality over your own bias. And third, probing, asking deep questions to elicit specific cognitive activity and challenge those old schemas. You can use these strategies with a coach, for sure, but you can also apply them directly to your own internal dialogue. Which brings us to our final takeaway. Instead of beating yourself up and asking, "What is wrong with me?" I want you to step back and ask yourself, what pattern is your brain repeating? Your identity shapes your behavior, and your behavior shapes your future. You are not your old habits, you're simply witnessing a biological loop running its course. Identify the cue, inject a new routine, demand an instant reward, and take your very first step toward neuroplastic change.